Alright, welcome back to another episode of Bear's Guide 205. This is the last lesson in Unit 7 and the last official lesson in the curriculum for AP Human Geography. We have finally made it, at least for me. So welcome. We're here. Now we're going to talk about the effects of suburbanization, or the effects of urbanization in the developed world. Going to dig in and see how we in the U.S. Have changed because of this. So let's remember that suburbanization happens in the 40s and 50s when the US is done building our cities and we're ready to move out to the suburbs. We want to move out to the suburbs because there's more space, the houses are nicer, there are better schools, there's less crime, there's less traffic, so on and so forth. But there are some other reasons too that we want to start moving out to the suburbs. One, we have interstates now. We have the highway system. People have cars. And so people can live out in the suburbs and commute to work in an easy way, an efficient way. So the suburbs start to become, more utilized, and people really want to move out there. We also have to consider that we have tons of prosperity in the United States after World War II. People can afford to buy houses out in the suburbs. They can afford to buy cars. This was a really unique time in American history because we had a lot of Fordist labor that actually was a good amount of paying jobs, and we have a good amount of post-Fordist labor. It's before the International Division of Labor, so a lot of people are cultivating a lot of money and being able to, live in the suburbs and buy cars and so on and so forth. And we also have a manufacturing boom. Technology is booming, and we can just make so much stuff. And then finally, the biggest reason, the boomers themselves, the boomers we always talk about, the baby boom. People came back from World War II and had lots of kids, and people wanted to raise those kids in a quiet place with better schools, more space, and less crime, so the suburbs were perfect for that. But not everybody got to participate in said movement to the suburbs, and so we have to understand too the implications of suburbanization is definitely a racial consequence because of the decisions that were made at the time by groups of people that didn't want to provide opportunities to move out to the suburbs for everybody in the United States, but just for white people. So we're going to explore this concept called white flight. Now, white flight, or we'll talk about white flight more in class, and it is exactly what it sounds like. But what else do we have to understand to prepare for class? And one of those things is this idea of what followed the suburbs. So when people start to move out to the suburbs, and the services start to follow them too. So we start to see retail stores and other various services move their way out to the suburbs. And we have stages to this movement of retail stores. So stage one, before suburbanization, you would just have downtown department stores that people would commute to the central business district, and they would go to those stores and they would have to go into the urban area. But then in the 70s and 80s, we see this switch where services start to go out to the suburbs and we see suburban malls get built. And that's a big thing, right? For anybody that's watched Stranger Things, it's the perfect example, the season where they get the mall. But not to get too off track. All right, stage three is the mega stores, big box retail. We're talking Kmart, we're talking Walmart, we're talking Target. And then now we're talking about the internet. We know that we really don't even go to stores anymore. So if you notice too that the travel time, the range is decreased dramatically for for buyers in the suburban areas. And because of this, because of all these services that have gone out to the suburbs, it's actually created these small cities, and we have a name for them. They're called edge cities. This idea that these places start off as suburbs, but now they've become like these small towns that you can basically live in, and you don't have to go to the central business district. You don't have to go to the urban area to get everything you need because everything is provided in those suburban areas. So business and industries will move into the area, turning it into an edge city. But think about that these services that are moving to the suburbs are utilizing their site factors. They're getting closer to their consumers. Maybe the land is cheaper. Maybe the labor is out there. They can hire all the people that are living out there to run these stores. So on and so forth. So, but the thing to take from this is the idea that people used to commute from the suburbs to the central business district for their jobs, for their services, whatever it may be. But now they can just stay in the suburbs and never have to go to the central business district. And that's why we use, city models like the galactic city model that make a little more sense when we talk about this concept of edge cities. And a perfect edge city, one that we know pretty well, is Brandon. And this really goes with that galactic city model, because to get out to Brandon, you got to take the highway. Highways are the easiest ways to get out there. And they have, essentially all the services that people need in Brandon, so they don't have to drive to Tampa anymore to get those things. Finally, we have to talk about the concept of a density gradient. So much like the von Thunen model and various models that we've talked about, or location theories with situation where cost of land changes based on where it's located. So as people moved out to the suburbs, the density of American cities changed, like where people live. All right, so when we talk about the density gradient, we're talking about where people live in relation to the central business district. So if you have the central business district, it's mostly going to be office buildings. You don't have a lot of land in the central business district, so it's very expensive. So people can't really afford to live there, and if they do, it's not like they're living in houses. We don't build houses in downtown. We build like small condos and stuff like that that are real expensive. Now, the people that live around the city are mostly going to be apartments. Land is still expensive around the downtown area, around in the city area, and people can't afford to buy whole blocks or like whole pieces of land, so we build apartments because that's what people can afford. You'll start seeing some houses, but not too many. And then you get to the suburbs, where this is where a lot of people live, because land is cheap enough, so then people can buy houses and have yards and so on and so forth. Now this looks very confusing, so let's see a model of this. Or not yet. So the density gradient is based off bid rent, the cost of land. We know that land is more expensive near the city. Like we live in Tampa. We know that living in downtown Tampa is incredibly expensive. And a small one or two bedroom apartment in downtown Tampa is like $250,000-$300,000, while you can buy a house out in the suburbs around Tampa for the same price and get like a 4 bedroom house that's brand new. It's really crazy, the price of land. But looking at this here, you can see, so in the central business district, that blue part is where people can live. You have these big skyscrapers, you have these buildings. So it's going to be very compact in the central business district. And then with the city apartments, you have the blue buildings and people will live in there. And then in that same amount of land in the suburbs, we can put 4 houses. So if we're all looking at the same size of land, this is how people can be distributed in the city. So obviously it's the most dense in those city apartments because we're going to pack so many people together. And then the suburbs are most spread out. But if you look at it without looking at the density, suburbs is where we have the most people. The suburbs are the least dense but have the most people. Let's see this on a chart. All right, so what you're looking at here is the density gradient chart, and we have a couple questions that help us understand how this chart works. So the first question says, what sections of the urban area are located at points A, B, and C, if we were labeling them suburbs, central business district, and city? A is going to be your central business district. This is where you have somewhat density, but not a lot, because you have some people living in the central business district, just not a lot of people, because not a lot of housing is available, and the housing that is available, remember, is incredibly expensive because land isn't as available in the central business district. But around the city where we want people, because whether we're looking at any of these city models to have workers for the central business district, we're going to build a lot of apartments and condos because the land is still very valuable, so we're going to pack a ton of people onto it and not put these houses. But as we move away from the city, we get that huge drop and we make it out into C, which is the suburbs. Right, now what type of housing is available at each point? Already kind of talked about this. In A, we're going to see condos, B, condos and apartments, and it's not till C where we really start to see the housing, because remember, houses are big, they're spaced out, we want more space. So why is the density high and low at each point? Be able to explain that in A and B, we're trying to pack a lot of people near the central business district, and out in the suburbs, people don't want to be packed together. And that's essentially it, and just understanding that the land increases in price to about the peak of B and then drops off. So the goal was to analyze the causes and effects of suburbanization in the developed world. What you want to be able to do is answer these questions. Try not to use your notes, as you're answering these. Give 4 specific examples of each stage of retail, what caused the changes from stage 1 and 2, what's an edge city, how do they develop, how does the density gradient change from city center to the periphery, do most people live in the central business district, city, or suburbs, and then finally put the following 3 terms in order of which causes which. Right? Just trying to work with this information. Be able to do these things, and you'll have a lock on this lesson. The final thing I want you to complete before coming into class the next day is completing this FRQ, comparing these 2 types of stimulus you have on here, answer some questions. Should be really, really easy and straightforward. So if you have any questions, make sure to write them down in your notebook so you can have them for class. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for future videos so you're updated when they drop on YouTube. As always, this is Bears Guys 205, and I'll see you next time.